Today live March 5, 2021. World News Headlines. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump's husband, dismissed by his stepfather after a big argument. Debate to begin in U.S. Senate on Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. Civil rights groups urge companies to join fight against Georgia voting restrictions. Cuomo accuser rejects his public apology in TV interview. Congressman sues Trump over deadly Capitol siege, charges civil rights violation. I'm ready to talk, says Meghan ahead of Oprah interview. Saudi-led coalition says it downed 6 Houthi drones fired at Khamis Mushait. Analysis: end of the road for Hong Kong's democratic dream as China improves its voting system. Pope urges Iraqis to shun past violence and give peace a chance. UN Security Council due to meet on Myanmar crisis as protesters are again met with gunfire. License to thrill pant repays India's faith with dazzling ton. Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump's husband, dismissed by his stepfather after a big argument. Jared Kushner with absent subscribers. The son-in-law of Donald Trump was not seen with the former U.S. president during the Conservative Political Action Conference, a political meeting of great importance. What feed many rumors? Once omnipresent alongside his stepfather, has Jared Kushner become persona non grata? Or would he have decided to move away for good from the man who was his former boss? So many questions to which CNN tried to answer this March 5, while the former senior advisor to Donald Trump now seems to be on a list of absent subscribers. The husband of Ivanka Trump was not seen with the American billionaire during his appearance at the Conservative Political Action Conference, which took place in Florida between February 25 and 28. This political meeting, of great importance, brings together every year the most prominent personalities of the Conservative Party. The noted absence of Jared Kushner now feeds rumors of all kinds. Some relatives of the former advisor, interviewed by our American sisters, say that the latter has put politics aside to take time with his family. He who has multiplied the sunny outings with his wife in Florida. For other sources, interviewed by CNN, this estrangement would be the result of an argument between Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. The former U.S. president, unable to take responsibility for his actions, would have simply blamed his stepson for the failure of his re-election last November. Tired of Donald Trump's antics? A reproach that would have led the American billionaire to dismiss the 40-year-old businessman from the group he formed to influence the midterm elections in 2022. And it seems that the falling out between the two men benefits Jared Kushner himself. Because according to some relatives, still interviewed by CNN, the former director of the American Bureau for Innovation would have had enough of the antics of his father-in-law. The drama of politics has worn him out. Ultimately, Trump is wearing everyone out, an indiscreet voice said. Following the defeat of Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump's husband would have simply wanted to move away to focus on his business, especially in the Middle East, where he is trying to negotiate certain peace agreements. He would like to be someone you could go to, on the Republican side, to strike a deal, another source reveals. Jared Kushner's political future could therefore be played out in the shadows, far from the vicissitudes of Donald Trump. Debate to begin in U.S. Senate on Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. Washington, a sharply divided U.S. Senate will begin a contentious debate on Friday on a $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid bill that is President Joe Biden's first major legislative initiative, with Democrats pressing ahead without any Republican support. The Senate voted on Thursday to take up the bill in a party-line 51-50 vote, with Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie, but Republicans delayed the start of the debate by forcing the hours-long reading of the full text of the 628-page measure. The Senate is expected to debate the bill 3 hours on Friday before considering a multitude of amendments, which could require a marathon voting session, before taking a vote on final passage in a process that could extend into the weekend. Republicans are expected to use procedural maneuvers to slow the process. If the Senate approves the bill, it will have to be sent back to the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives for final passage. Democrats hope Biden can sign the bill into law before March 14, when some of the current benefits run out. With no votes to spare, Senate Democrats have tweaked the measure to ensure all 50 of their members would support it. Those changes would steer more aid to smaller U.S. states and add money for infrastructure projects, among other adjustments. But efforts by some senators to alter temporary federal unemployment benefits failed. The Senate bill keeps the House plan for $400 per week payments through August 29. It was unclear whether any senators would try to change that figure, possibly to $300, during the amendment process in coming days. The time is now to move forward with big, bold, strong relief for the American people, said Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who has promised to keep the Senate at work until the bill is passed. Republicans, who broadly backed COVID-19 relief spending early in the pandemic, have criticized the bill's price tag. The relief legislation includes funding for vaccines and medical supplies, extends jobless assistance, and provides a new round of emergency financial aid to households, small businesses, and state and local governments. Opinion polls indicate broad public support. Senate Democrats on Wednesday tightened criteria for stimulus checks so fewer high-income households would qualify. The compromise means that 9 million fewer households would receive a stimulus payment than in the last tranche of payouts in 2020. It also lowers the cost of the legislation by $12 billion, according to Senate Democrats. On Thursday, they said they had increased minimum payments to states with smaller rural populations to match the $1.25 billion minimum contained in last year's CARES Act. The bill passed by the House set the floor at $500 million. The pandemic has killed nearly 520,000 Americans and thrown millions out of work, although infection rates have eased in recent weeks as more people are vaccinated. But efforts by some senators to alter temporary federal unemployment benefits failed. The Senate bill keeps the House plan for $400 per week payments through August 29. It was unclear whether any senators would try to change that figure, possibly to $300, during the amendment process in coming days. The time is now to move forward with big, bold, strong relief for the American people, said Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who has promised to keep the Senate at work until the bill is passed. Republicans, who broadly backed COVID-19 relief spending early in the pandemic, have criticized the bill's price tag. The relief legislation includes funding for vaccines and medical supplies, extends jobless assistance, and provides a new round of emergency financial aid to households, small businesses, and state and local governments. Opinion polls indicate broad public support. Senate Democrats on Wednesday tightened criteria for stimulus checks so fewer high-income households would qualify. The compromise means that 9 million fewer households would receive a stimulus payment than in the last tranche of payouts in 2020. It also lowers the cost of the legislation by $12 billion, according to Senate Democrats. On Thursday, they said they had increased minimum payments to states with smaller rural populations to match the $1.25 billion minimum contained in last year's CARES Act. The bill passed by the House set the floor at $500 million. The pandemic has killed nearly 520,000 Americans and thrown millions out of work, although infection rates have eased in recent weeks as more people are vaccinated. Big, bloated, wasteful. The Senate's number 2 Republican, John Thune, said larger states like California, New York, and Illinois still got the lion's share in the big, bloated, wasteful bill. You got taxpayers in places like South Dakota and North Carolina and Georgia and other places around the country that essentially are writing checks to states which really aren't needed, Thune told PBS. Democrats also included $10 billion for infrastructure, $8.5 billion for health providers, and expanded healthcare subsidies for those who lose their jobs. In the Senate, bills usually require the support of 60 senators. But the coronavirus relief bill is being advanced under a legislative maneuver known as reconciliation that allows passage with a simple majority vote. Civil rights groups urge companies to join fight against Georgia voting restrictions. Voting rights groups are calling on companies such as Coca-Cola Company and Delta Airlines Incorporated to oppose efforts by Republican lawmakers in Georgia to enact sweeping new restrictions on voting access in the battleground state. The organizations, including Black Voters Matter, the New Georgia Project, and the Georgia NAACP, launched a campaign on social media and in local news outlets this week asking the corporations to take a stand against legislation they said aims to curb turnout from Democratic-leaning black voters. Black voters were crucial to helping elect Democrat President Joe Biden in the November election and 2 Democratic senators in a January runoff in Georgia, a once unthinkable scenario in the traditionally Republican southern state. Some of these companies have made beautiful statements for Black Lives Matter, said Cliff Albright, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, a group focused on increasing Black Americans' voting access. Yet here, in the moment where it matters most, they have been silent. Republicans in Georgia and across the country are using former President Donald Trump's false claims of voter fraud to back state-level voting changes they say are needed to restore election integrity. Republicans asked the U.S. Supreme Court this week to uphold voting restrictions in Arizona in a case that could further hobble the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibits racial discrimination in voting. They also opposed an election reform bill passed on Wednesday by the Democratic-controlled U.S. House of Representatives. The For the People Act, the most comprehensive voting bill since the 1965 Act, faces long odds in the Senate, with Republicans saying it fails to do enough to combat fraud. In Georgia, likely one of the biggest battlegrounds in the 2022 elections with the U.S. Senate seat and the governor's office on the ballot. Republican state lawmakers sponsoring the voting measures maintain they are meant to safeguard elections. A bill passed by the Republican-controlled Georgia House on Monday would restrict ballot drop boxes, tighten absentee voting requirements, and limit early voting on Sundays, curtailing traditional souls to the polls voter turnout programs in black churches. Full-page ads. Some voting rights groups have increased their focus on corporations based in Georgia after Popular Information, an online politics newsletter run by Judd Gum, a former aide to Democrat Hillary Clinton, cited campaign finance records. Popular showing the companies had donated around $7.4 million since 2018 to politicians sponsoring the voting legislation. The groups took out several full-page ads in local newspapers urging Delta, Coca-Cola, Southern Company, Home Depot Incorporated, United Parcel Service Incorporated, and Aflac Incorporated to stop the donations and support federal voting rights reform. Albright said the groups will encourage Georgia residents to call the companies and that protests could be organized in front of their offices. In statements to Reuters, Coca-Cola, UPS, Delta, Home Depot, and Aflac said they were committed to voter rights but did not provide specifics about their stance on the Georgia bills or their future political donations. Coca-Cola said it paused political donations in January, when Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol. The company added that it supported efforts to help facilitate a balanced approach to the voting bills. Aflac also said it paused all political donations in January. Delta said it had not made any individual contributions to Georgia House or Senate candidates in 2020. UPS and Coca-Cola said they were working with local commerce chambers on voting rights issues. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce did not comment on ongoing talks, referring Reuters to a February 16 statement in which the group said it believed it should be easy to vote, hard to commit fraud. Southern Company declined to comment. U.S. companies in general are becoming more reticent about the exposure that comes with political donations, said Donald Green, a political science professor at Columbia University. This will give them yet another excuse to back away from that type of contribution, Green said. Georgia's Republican Party did not respond to a request for comment on voting rights groups' efforts to enlist companies' help in fighting the bills. The Georgia proposals have drawn scrutiny from More Than a Vote, a voter rights organization founded by LeBron James. The group, which has supported athlete demonstrations in the past, tweeted it was teaming up with the NBA and the Georgia NAACP to take on voter suppression at this weekend's All-Star Game in Atlanta. Cuomo accuser rejects his public apology in TV interview. The second of three women who have accused New York Governor Andrew Cuomo of sexual misconduct rejected his public apology on Thursday, a response likely to ratchet up pressure on the embattled Democrat. Charlotte Bennett, a 25-year-old former aide to Cuomo who has said the governor questioned her about her sex life with what she took as sexual overtones, made her comments in an interview broadcast by CBS News. "It's not an apology. It's not an issue of my feelings. It's an issue of his actions. The fact is that he was sexually harassing me and he has not apologized for sexually harassing me and he can't even use my name," Bennett said. Three women, including Bennett, have come forward to accuse Cuomo, 63, of sexually harassing them or making inappropriate remarks. He has denied any misconduct and pledged to cooperate with a review by the state's attorney general. On Wednesday, he offered a lengthy and sometimes emotional public apology, saying, "I feel awful about it and frankly I am embarrassed by it." Lindsey Boylan, a 36-year-old former Cuomo aide who first spoke out in December, has said the unwanted advances from the governor included an unsolicited kiss on the lips. Boylan, a candidate for Manhattan Borough President, also dismissed the governor's apology. "How can New Yorkers trust you at Nigov Cuomo to lead our state if you don't know when you've been inappropriate with your own staff?" she wrote on Twitter. The governor, who has rejected calls for his resignation that have come even from prominent Democratic state lawmakers, has also battled in recent weeks to respond to accusations that his administration sought to downplay the number of nursing home residents killed by COVID-19. Bennett, a former executive assistant and health policy advisor, told the New York Times in February that Cuomo peppered her with questions about her romantic life last year in what she viewed as an effort to have sex with her. A third woman has told the New York Times that the governor made unwanted advances and physical contact after meeting her at a wedding in 2019. Congressman sues Trump over deadly Capitol siege, charges civil rights violation. A Democratic congressman has sued Donald Trump, his lawyer Rudy Giuliani and other allies of the former president over the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol when violent Trump supporters tried to stop the certification of Trump's election defeat. The civil lawsuit, filed in federal court in Washington, alleges that the attack, which left 5 dead including a police officer, was a direct and foreseeable consequence of unlawful actions by Trump, Giuliani, Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., Republican Congressman Mo Brooks and others. As such, the defendants are responsible for the injury and destruction that followed, said Representative Eric Swalwell, who filed the lawsuit. Swalwell was one of the impeachment managers who last month attempted to persuade the U.S. Senate to block Trump from holding office again, saying Trump incited the violence. The Senate voted to acquit Trump. The lawsuit draws on evidence from the impeachment trial, including Trump tweets leading up to the attack, and details the former president's efforts to pressure state lawmakers to halt President Joe Biden's victory. Trump spokesman Jason Miller said in a statement that Swalwell is a lowlife with no credibility. Giuliani did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A Brooks spokesman also did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Swalwell is the second lawmaker to sue Trump over the insurrection. Representative Benny Thompson, a Democrat who chairs the House of Representatives Homeland Security Committee, last month filed a lawsuit accusing Trump, Giuliani, and 2 right-wing groups of conspiring to incite the riot. Swalwell's lawsuit alleges Trump and his allies broke a U.S. law that prohibits conspiracies to violate civil rights. The lawsuit seeks monetary damages against the defendants, including punitive damages. Jessica Levinson, a professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, said Swalwell's lawsuit was not a slam dunk but might eventually result in Trump sitting for an interview under oath. As with so many suits against Trump, the name of the game may be to keep the suit going long enough to take depositions and obtain discovery, Levinson said. "I'm ready to talk," says Meghan ahead of Oprah interview. London Meghan, Britain's Duchess of Sussex, said she had given an in-depth interview to U.S. chat show host Oprah Winfrey to be aired on Sunday because she was now free to speak for herself after she and husband Prince Harry quit their royal duties. Meghan, 39, and Queen Elizabeth's grandson Harry, 36, stunned the royal family in January last year by announcing they would step down from their official royal roles to forge a new, independent life in California. The split was confirmed last month, and, in the last week, the couple in Buckingham Palace have engaged in an increasingly bitter war of words, amid claims of lies, bullying and smears. "I'm ready to talk," Meghan, a former American actress, told Winfrey in an excerpt shown on U.S. station CBS on Friday ahead of Sunday's broadcast, as she explained why she had agreed to the interview. "As an adult who lived a really independent life to then go into this construct that is different than I think what people imagine it to be, it's really liberating to be able to have the right and the privilege in some ways to be able to say yes." Harry and Meghan married in May 2018, becoming global celebrities combining British royalty and Hollywood glamour. But less than 2 years later, they stepped away from official duties, saying the media intrusion was overbearing. Meghan later revealed she felt unprotected by the monarchy while pregnant with son Archie. Their decision to give the interview to Winfrey has been criticized by some newspapers as hypocrisy, flying in the face of their stated desire for privacy. "We have the ability to make our own choices in a way that I couldn't have said yes to a previous request for an interview. That wasn't my choice to make," Meghan told Winfrey, a guest at their wedding, in Friday's excerpt. "It's really liberating to be able to have the right and the privilege in some ways to be able to say yes, to be able to just make a choice on your own and just be able to speak for yourself." Winfrey said she had first asked Meghan for an interview in early 2018. In a previous excerpt, the Duchess told Winfrey that Buckingham Palace had been guilty of perpetuating falsehoods about her and her spouse. Earlier this week, the palace said it would be investigating allegations that Meghan had bullied former members of staff, saying it was very concerned about the claims. The interview comes as Harry's 99-year-old grandfather, Prince Philip, is in hospital, where he underwent a successful procedure for a pre-existing heart condition on Wednesday. "There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the situation is toxic," royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams told Reuters. "All of this will define their relations with the royal family for the foreseeable future. It's extremely perilous." Saudi-led coalition says it downed 6 Houthi drones fired at Khamis Mushait. Dubai, the Saudi-led coalition fighting the Houthi group in Yemen said it had intercepted 6 explosive drones fired towards the kingdom on Friday, with the Houthis claiming to have launched attacks into southern Saudi Arabia since dawn. The Iran-aligned Houthis have recently stepped up cross-border drone and missile attacks on Saudi cities, mostly targeting the southern part of the country. The coalition says it intercepts most attacks. The Houthis fired the 6 intercepted drones towards Khamis Mushait near the Yemen border in attacks since dawn, the coalition said in statements carried by Saudi state news agency SPA and Iqbariya TV. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sarriya said in Twitter posts on Friday that 3 drones had been fired at dawn, and 5 in the afternoon. They hit Aba International Airport and King Khalid Air Base, in the Khamis Mushait area, he said. Yemen's Houthi forces said on Thursday they fired a missile and hit a Saudi Aramco facility in the Red Sea city of Jeddah. There has been no confirmation from the Saudi authorities. The United States and United Nations have renewed peace efforts as fighting has also intensified in Yemen's gas-rich Marib region. On Tuesday, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed new sanctions on two Houthi military leaders. The conflict is widely seen as a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The Houthis deny being puppets of Tehran and say they are fighting a corrupt system. Analysis: End of the road for Hong Kong's democratic dream as China improves its voting system. Hong Kong. Ever since Britain returned Hong Kong to Chinese rule in 1997, opposition activists have tried to bring full democracy to the city. Believing that China would live up to its promise to one day allow universal suffrage to elect the city's leader. On Friday, that campaign was dealt its biggest blow. Chinese parliamentarians in Beijing unveiled details of a plan to revamp the political structure of China's freest city that critics say has all but killed off the pledge of one person, one vote. China's move comes months after a sweeping national security law was imposed on the Asian financial hub, cracking down on dissent, and more than a year after months of sometimes violent anti-China, pro-democracy protests which swept the city. There is not much we can do to effectively change what they're deciding, the head of the Democratic Party, Lo Kin-hei, told Reuters. The structural changes will include increasing the city's legislative seats from 70 to 90, with some of these to now be decided by a committee stacked with Beijing loyalists. Seats likely to be controlled by the Democrats will either be scrapped or reduced. A 1,200-person committee that picks Hong Kong's leader will be expanded, further improving a system controlled by Chinese patriots, according to Wang Chen, a vice chairman of the Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress. Wang told reporters the moves, that would involve redrafting parts of Hong Kong's mini-constitution, the Basic Law, would consolidate China's overall jurisdiction over the city and fix deep-seated problems once and for all. It was in the Basic Law that Beijing promised universal suffrage as an ultimate goal for Hong Kong. But Friday's moves now stand to nip in the bud the risk of any resurgence of the democracy movement, founded after Beijing's violent crackdown on pro-democracy protesters in and around Tiananmen Square in 1989. With many leading Democrats now jailed or forced into exile, including Lo's predecessor, Wu Chi-wei, who was denied bail this week along with dozens of others for an alleged conspiracy to overthrow the government, the Democrats will try to utilize their grassroots networks to keep their ideals alive. The trust towards the system is fading, and it's not a good sign if we want a more peaceful society to not allow different voices to be in harmony, Lo told Reuters. Moving backwards, another veteran democracy campaigner said Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who became head of the Communist Party in 2012, had changed the trajectory of Hong Kong's moves towards full democracy, going against the oft-cited promise of China's late leader, Deng Xiaoping, to let Hong Kong people rule Hong Kong. It's a great tragedy, said the source, who declined to be identified given the sensitivity of the political atmosphere. They're moving backwards, not forwards, and taking us back in time to a dark, dark place. With the opposition now likely to become a permanent minority in a remodeled legislature, the shift towards China's one-party model will create openings for new patriotic factions, critics and some pro-Beijing politicians say. China, given its rise into a global superpower, now has the power and resources to extend its autocratic governance despite criticism and sanctions from the West. Some see Hong Kong's British common law legal system as the last bastion against China's tightening authoritarian grip. More than 50 Democratic advocates crammed into a court in the city this week, some of whom face potential life imprisonment on a subversion charge under the national security law promulgated directly by China's parliament last June. Two Democrats, veteran activist Loan Kwok Hung and former law professor Benny Tai, had to shuttle between two courtrooms for concurrent hearings, while others were taken to hospital after falling ill during marathon sessions. Under the security law, the onus rests on defendants to argue a case for bail, which critics say overturns the common law tradition. Hong Kong returned to China in 1997 under a one-country, two-systems formula, which guaranteed its way of life, freedoms and independent legal system. Barrister Martin Lee, 82, dubbed the city's father of democracy, wrote in a 2014 editorial in the New York Times that universal suffrage was the only way to honor Deng's one-country, two-systems formula and to keep his blueprint from becoming a litany of broken promises. The current moves could be a final departure from that. This is now an overcorrection, a senior Western diplomat told Reuters. In trying to wrest control back, there is a danger that they will overdo it and kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Pope urges Iraqis to shun past violence and give peace a chance. Baghdad. Pope Francis, beginning the first trip by a pontiff to Iraq, made an impassioned call on Friday for an end to the militant violence and religious strife that has plagued the country for decades, saying peacemakers should finally be given a chance. May the clash of arms be silenced. May there be an end to acts of violence and extremism, he said, addressing Iraqi President Barham Salih, politicians and diplomats at the presidential palace. Francis arrived at Baghdad airport under tight security, after telling reporters on his plane that he felt duty-bound to make the emblematic trip because the country has been martyred for so many years. Hundreds of people gathered in small clusters to see him being driven into Baghdad in bulletproof BMW, a departure for a pope who normally insists on using small, normal cars. A motorcade of dozens of vehicles accompanied him out of the airport compound, which recently came under rocket fire from militia groups. Most of the people along the roads and even some in the presidential palace did not wear masks, despite the risk of coronavirus. As Francis and the president walked together, the 84-year-old pope limped noticeably, indicating that his sciatica may have flared up again. The condition forced him to cancel several events earlier this year. In his speech at the palace, Francis criticized factional and foreign interests that have destabilized Iraq and the wider region and hit ordinary people the hardest. Iraq has suffered the disastrous effects of wars, the scourge of terrorism and sectarian conflicts often grounded in a fundamentalism incapable of accepting the peaceful coexistence of different ethnic and religious groups, Francis said. He later paid tribute to people killed in attacks motivated by religion, visiting a Baghdad church where Islamist gunmen killed about 50 worshippers in 2010. Their deaths were a reminder that violence or the shedding of blood are incompatible with authentic religious teachings, he said. Iraq's security has improved since the defeat of Islamic State in 2017, but the country continues to be a theater for global and regional score settling, especially a bitter U.S.-Iran rivalry that has played out on Iraqi soil. The U.S. invasion of 2003, after years of international sanctions and a devastating war with Iran instigated by former leader Saddam Hussein in the 1980s, plunged Iraq into sectarian conflict and chronic mismanagement that has plagued it since. Suicide bombers, rocket attacks. The country has deployed thousands of additional security personnel to protect the Pope during the visit, which comes after a spate of rocket and suicide bomb attacks. Francis told reporters on the plane he was happy to be making trips again after 16 months of being unable to make foreign trips because of the coronavirus. This visit is one of a kind. We are excited, and we all need this visit, all Iraqis do, said an Iraqi Christian from Baghdad, Majin Darius. The Pope's whirlwind tour will take him by plane, helicopter and cars to 4 cities, including areas that most foreign dignitaries are unable to reach, let alone in such a short space of time. He will say Mass at a Baghdad church, meet Iraq's top Shiite Muslim cleric in the southern city of Najaf and travel north to Mosul, where the army had to empty the streets for security reasons last year for a visit by Iraq's prime minister. Mosul is a former stronghold of Islamic State, and churches and other buildings there still bear the scars of conflict. Since the defeat of the Islamic State militants in 2017, Iraq has seen a greater degree of security, though violence persists, often in the form of rocket attacks by Iran-aligned militias on U.S. targets, and U.S. military action in response. Islamic State remains a threat. In January, a suicide attack claimed by the Sunni militant group killed 32 people in Baghdad's deadliest such attack for years. The pontiff will also visit the birthplace of the prophet Abraham, who is revered by Christians, Muslims, and Jews, and meet Iraq's revered top Shiite Muslim cleric, 90-year-old Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani. UN Security Council due to meet on Myanmar crisis as protesters are again met with gunfire. Police in Myanmar on Friday opened fire on protesters against last month's military coup, killing 1 man, as international condemnation rained down on the junta ahead of a United Nations Security Council meeting to discuss the crisis. The violence took place as the United States announced new sanctions targeting military conglomerates after the deaths of dozens of civilian protesters. Activists demanding the restoration of the elected government of veteran democracy champion Aung San Suu Kyi held more demonstrations in several towns and cities, with thousands marching peacefully through the second city of Mandalay. The Stone Age is over, we're not scared because you threaten us, the crowd chanted. Police opened fire and 1 man was killed, witnesses and a doctor told Reuters by telephone. In the main city of Yangon, police fired rubber bullets and stun grenades to disperse protesters who had been joined by about 100 doctors in white coats, witnesses said. Crowds also gathered in Pathane, to the west of Yangon, and in central Myanmar, where dozens of women in straw hats held up signs calling for Suu Kyi's release, witnesses said. A spokesman for the ruling military council did not answer telephone calls seeking comment. Thousands also rallied in the southeastern Karen state, accompanied by fighters from the Karen National Union (KNU), an ethnic armed group engaged in a long-running war with the military. During the rally, the strongest indication yet of support for the anti-coup movement from one of the country's myriad ethnic armed groups, KNU troops flashed the three-finger salute popularized by protesters and handed out water bottles. The KNU said in a statement it would not tolerate attacks on peaceful protesters by the army. People in urban areas, ethnic armed groups, and the international community must work together until the military dictatorship falls, it said. On Thursday, police broke up rallies with tear gas and gunfire in several cities, but the crackdown was more restrained than on Wednesday, when the United Nations said 38 people were killed in the bloodiest day of protests. In all, at least 55 people have been killed since the February 1st coup. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet demanded the security forces halt what she called their vicious crackdown on peaceful protesters. Bachelet said more than 1,700 people had been arrested, including 29 journalists. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies said some Red Cross volunteers had been injured and wrongfully arrested, and Red Cross ambulances had been damaged. The military seized power, saying that the landslide victory of Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, NLD, in an election in November was fraudulent. The Electoral Commission has said the ballot was fair. The junta has promised new elections but not given a date. Activists have rejected that and demand the release of Suu Kyi, who has been in detention since the coup. Disobedience. Singapore has been the most outspoken of Myanmar's neighbors, and its foreign minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, said it was a national shame for armed forces to use weapons against their people. But condemnation of the coup and subsequent violence has come largely from the West, with Asian nations, including India, mostly more restrained. The junta can count on some support from Russia and China, a major investor, at the United Nations. The military has weathered isolation and sanctions during previous years of army rule and has indicated it will not be swayed this time around. The UN human rights investigator on Myanmar, Thomas Andrews, urged the Security Council, which meets to discuss the situation later on Friday, to impose a global arms embargo and targeted economic sanctions on the junta. The United States has told China, which has declined to condemn the coup, that it expects it to play a constructive role. China has said stability is a top priority. The military, which ruled directly for nearly 50 years until it embarked on a tentative transition to democracy a decade ago, has been struggling to impose its authority on a country where many people abhor the thought of a return of army rule. A civil disobedience campaign of strikes running parallel with the protests has been supported by many government workers, including a trickle of policemen. Indian security forces meanwhile stepped up border patrols to stop any more people entering, Indian officials said. About 20 policemen crossed into India this week, fearing persecution for disobeying orders to enforce the crackdown. As of now, we are not letting anybody enter, Maria Zawali, a government official in Mizoram state, told Reuters. The move follows the defection over the border of some low-ranking Myanmar police officers who were unwilling to obey orders to suppress demo. More than 10 Myanmar diplomats in foreign missions have also declared their support for the pro-democracy campaign, the Irrawaddy news outlet reported. In Washington, it was unclear whether Myanmar's embassy was still representing the junta. In New York, a clash over who represents Myanmar at the United Nations was averted after the junta's replacement quit and the Myanmar UN mission confirmed that Ambassador Cuomo Tun remained in the job. The junta fired Cuomo Tun on Saturday after he urged countries at the UN General Assembly to use any means necessary to reverse the coup. License to thrill, Pant repays India's faith with dazzling Tun. Ahmedabad, India. The India team management often shields Rishabh Pant from criticism by calling him a special talent, and the 23-year-old lived up to the billing on Friday, smashing a potentially match-winning century in the fourth and final test against England. Ben Stokes spearheaded England's lion-hearted bowling effort in the first two sessions, but Pant turned the game on its head with spectacular late assault to put India on the box seat. Known for his six-hitting prowess, Pant first helped India eclipse England's first innings total of 205 before exhibiting his breathtaking stroke play. Pant particularly stood out for his treatment of Test cricket's most successful fast bowler when James Anderson ran in with a fresh second new ball in hand. Pant stepped out to hit him for a boundary and, in Anderson's next over, reverse swept England's premier seamer to race into the 90s. Equally impressive was how he brought up his 100 by going on one knee and sweeping rival captain Joe Root for a six. Former captain and current Indian board chief Sourav Ganguly took to Twitter to laud the unbelievable talent, tipping him to be an all-time great in all formats in the years to come. Teammate Rohit Sharma highlighted Pant's worth after the second day's play. "We need that spark in the middle and he brings that to us," Rohit told reporters. He is batting in his own style, which is absolutely fine from the team perspective, because he seems to be getting the job done, which is more important. Pant's wicket-keeping skills may not impress all, but there is little doubt about his batting potentials. Rohit said the team management had explained to Pant how he should approach his batting and was happy how the left-hander paced his knock in Ahmedabad. In the first half of his innings, he was quite respectful to bowlers. He was trusting his defense, Rohit added. With people like Pant, you need to back their skills, back their ability. Management completely understands that, and he's been given that freedom, which is very, very important. It's a great sign. He'll flourish. He will give you these kind of knocks every now and then. Don't forget to comment below with your common sense and subscribe to your podcast. This helps bring the podcast to life and grow it. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We can't wait to continue this adventure with you. Support us on PayPal. Thank you very much and enjoy listening.